let's talk about automation, or essentially how to create amplitude adjustments to audio items and tracks over time. That's, of course, an undersell. As you learn more about DAWs, automation can be applied essentially to any parameter in a DAW, which is really exciting. But today we're going to look at it specifically in relationship to amplitude as well as panning. So what is automation? Well, let me pull up a blank screen here and change my view. So let's say we've got our waveform of some sort. Bing, da-doon, 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 da-doon. Automation allows us to change some sort of parameter over time. So let's say it's amplitude. Maybe we want it really loud here, and then we're going to drop it down over here, and then it'll be louder again over here. And then our resulting audio signal might look something like this, where we've still got the really loud, and then it's going to be multiplied by this quieter amplitude level before then able to get really loud again. And so we see where we would apply this automation, that it would multiply down the amplitude level of our track in time. Great. So what does that mean for us? Well, in a DAW, of course, this automation is critical to our ability to work. And there's a number of ways of dealing with it, but first thing we have to do is figure out how to actually look at the automation itself. So here's our Reaper session we've been working with earlier, and it's got some bad pseudo sound art music nonsense, but it'll serve our purposes for the time being. First thing we need to do when contemplating automation is actually pull up the automation lane. And to do that, there's this trim here. Let me highlight it for you. We see this trim. Come on. Trim right there in Reaper. And if I press that, it's going to bring up this window. And Reaper's going to call it envelopes, automation envelopes, track envelopes. We're going to call it automation. We're going to go back and forth between them. It's fine. But what I want to say is I want to tell it on this squeak track to enable volume envelopes automation, make it visible, and arm it. And then I can close that and we'll get rid of our thing here. So now if we go back and we listen to this current state of this amazing artwork, we'll mute our other things for the moment. If I move my mouse in here, we see we get that cursor with the sideways bar and the arrows going up and down. I can then change the envelope for this track. Notice it's quieter. And I can make it louder. And I can make it so loud that we'll actually clip. Notice we're getting some clipping. Great. But that's not where the power of this comes in. The power is not in the ability to raise or lower the envelope for the entirety of the track. We want to be able to change it over time. So notice there's a little ball right there on the left, essentially a circle. And what we want to be able to do is insert points to change. So if I hit the shift bar or shift button, you notice that my mouse changes the cursor to this up arrow in line, and it says insert envelope point. And then I can click and I'll get a envelope point. And then I'll release the shift bar, and then I can actually move this envelope point around in time as well as with regard to amplitude. So if we grab it over here and we pull it all the way down, and now when we listen over the course of this 8 seconds, we're going to go from full volume to no volume on the squeak sound. And I could, of course, go the other way, where we have it over here, and then start from nothing. So we're able to automate up volume in time. The other thing I can do is if I hit the Option key on my Mac, which I believe would be the Alt key on Windows, notice that the cursor changes to this vertical bar with horizontal arrows on either side, and I can affect the curve of this automation envelope line segment. So I could have a really drastic fade in. So we didn't really get a fade in until the very end. Likewise, I could have it over here and have a much quicker fade in that then takes a while to get to that full volume. How exciting. Wonderful. Okay. And of course, then we can add lots of automation points so that we can do all kinds of things. So let's say over here, we'll have a quick fade in. We're going to turn the grid off so that it's not snapping me in place. And then we'll create a automation curve like that. We'll grab another one that'll go down. And then we'll go up. And then we'll go to 0. And then we'll go down. And then we'll go all the way down. And we'll change the curve of that. And then we'll add another point and another point and another point, another point, and another point. And we'll just listen from right here. Great. And so you can start to hear some of that. But let's actually go over to some sort of steady source. I've got this train, so we'll just grab the train and we'll put it right here for the time being. Unmute it. Again, I'm going to hit the trim button, turn on volume envelopes, and then we can see it. And I can zoom in. We'll solo on this for the time being. And if I've got the shift key held, I can put markers kind of all over and be fairly drastic with them. So we can start to get some cool effects. And if I zoom in, of course, I could then go even further on this. So we'll down, up, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down, up. And we can start to get some pretty great amplitude effects by having those quick changes. Okay, let's mute this. The other thing we can do that's important is that we can actually draw in our envelope marker. So if I hit the Command key on Mac or Control on Windows, notice that a pencil comes up. And with this now, I can actually draw in my automation amplitude settings. Oops. Great. So again, that was with the Command key on Mac or Control key on Windows. Let's see here. So those are the ways that I wanted to draw in automation. Now, the other thing that I want you to be able to do is actually to record automation in real time, which is something that can be really cool. So let's grab our train here, and we're going to move it down so we can see it since we've incorporated it now into our piece for better or worse. And of course, that's not a great spot for it. So we'll move it below our squeaking sound. Wonderful. And we've got now automation possible for both the train and our squeak sound. And we'll go to the beginning. And I did not mean to do that. Let's there we go. Now it's even with everything else. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change over here. There's this global automation setting. And I'm going to change that to read for the moment. And notice that these went green. Just know that the arm for recording has to be active in the automation mode for what is about to happen for what I'm going to show you. I'm going to hit play, and I want you to watch these two faders. Notice that it's moving around. So we're actually seeing our automation in real time in our mixer. And this is great because this allows us to have a better idea of what's going on, to be able to change things. Again, over here in the global setting, if I change this back to trim, the green goes away, they're black again. And when I hit play, they're not going to move. Reaper offers us track-based trim at our mixer, as well as track-based automation, which is a really significant development from many other DAWs. So I can actually change the volume, relative volume or amplitude of my track trim with the fader, and then switch back over to read mode, and then see how the automation is working. This is going to get you in trouble. I know it is from time to time when you're like, why is my amplitude not balanced between tracks? And you're just going to have to figure out, get used to that. You're looking at those two things. The other thing I want you to notice, again, is if I unarm these two tracks right over here, they're no longer green. And they're not showing us this sound. But if you listen to the train here in a second, you still hear the automation, correct? So again, because it's not green, it's not armed, we're not able to see that automation in the fader, in case that's important to you. Instead, we're just seeing the trim. The next thing is where it starts to get really exciting, though. I'm going to move from read to touch. And we're going to keep it for these two. And we're going to turn on our obnoxious geese sound. And we're going to turn on our volume for the geese. And I'm going to play here. Oh, and I'm going to unsolo the train. I'm going to mute the train for the time being, just so we can hear the beauty that is the great North American goose. And we'll duplicate it out a couple times. And now I'm going to draw in an automation curve. That's just rather easy. There we go. And if we go back to the beginning, notice our goose fader changes in response to this curve. So it's going up. Remember, I'm in this touch mode. So in touch mode, I can actually record in automation when I touch the fader. So I'm going to start at the beginning again. We'll let it go out for a little bit. Then I'm going to grab it with my mouse and actually start to play this. And if I grab it here, notice that this is turned kind of a deep magenta. And as I go up, I can rewrite the automation, amplitude automation, for the goose track in real time. And it's changed right here. This is significant. This is incredibly significant. This means that not only can you write in automation using the pencil or other type of parameters up here where you can move things around, but you can actually use your ears and in real time respond to your sonic artwork, putting in automation. You can play this work in real time, changing it in real time, adding that effect in real time, adding it a human touch, moving it from kind of the mechanical to the human. This is critical. This is incredible to me. This is incredibly important. So this is something I want you to play around with this week, is actually turning these automation lanes into record mode and then recording into them. So there's a couple of different versions. There's read, touch, latch, and write. And they all do slightly different things. Read, you can't record into. So if I play here, I can grab it, but it's not changing the automation. If I'm in touch mode, whenever I grab it, it changes the automation, and then it goes back to whatever the automation was after I get done touching it. So if we're playing here, I can rewrite my automation. And notice when I let go of the mouse, it goes right back to what had been written. Latch mode keeps the fader at the current level as you keep playing that it was last touched at. Just watch and it'll make sense. So we'll go back to the beginning. We'll play. I'll grab this fader here. And I'll leave it right here. And notice now right in here that I'm just writing the volume that the fader is currently at. If I move the fader up again, it stays at the last volume. So it latches to the last position. If I never touch the fader though, it reads from the automation lane. So latch will change the automation and it latches the last value after you've touched it, but it won't change the automation if you haven't touched it. The last mode, write, will always write the current level of the fader. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Notice here I'm going to set my fader to negative 23.8, it looks like. And as you watch the fader here, it's going to write all the way across at 23.8. If I move it, it's great. Okay, sorry, where were we? The camera battery died for a moment, so I had to replace it. We were talking about the different types of modes. So again, there is read, which just will read the automation mode, touch, which will allow us to change the automation, and then it goes back to wherever it was after we get done touching it. Latch, which will hold the last value of the fader and keep writing it, but won't write it assuming we haven't touched the fader. And write, which will write all of them into the file, into the automation lane. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, one thing I want to say is that when you get done recording automation, something I often do is actually go back and clean up my recordings. So right here we see, let's say, let's start at the beginning here. We'll unmute everything so we can hear it, and we'll put ourselves in latch mode for the moment. We've got our squeak and all kinds of other things. So we've got squeak, and we'll also Doorwood turn that on. And I'll shrink things down a little bit so I can see everything. Just a touch more. And if you're having issues with screen real estate, another thing you can do, let's see here, is actually click on the automation lane and say show all, show visible track envelopes in media lane. And it condenses down those. I actually turned on the wrong one. This should be none. There we go, because it's muted anyway. So we're just going to show all of these for the moment in our media lanes, giving us a little bit more real estate on our screen. Sometimes that can be hard to see. Sometimes it's not. Just depends on what you're trying to do. And all of them will be, all of them are armed because I remember pressing it. So you can check on that and see it's armed right now. Let's see here. So we're going to start at the beginning and we'll set some initial levels. There, latch, train, here, geese there. Maybe I want my train to come up and my geese to start coming down. Great. So we wrote some things in, and some of it was good, some of it wasn't. I'd probably go back and do it again. So let's do that. We'll listen again. We'll clear out all of our clips. I'm going to start right away with my geese level here. Great. And so notice that I got that geese level back to where I wanted to. And I'm going to go back to touch mode because I've started to write some things in that I like. And I'm going to start the squeaks out much louder. And then we'll start to back them off. And maybe we'll back off our door slam. And my train gets admittedly too loud. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select, I'm I'm going to actually show my envelopes. I'm going to hit the V key. And then there's a way to arm all visible, hide all, show all active. Show envelope and lane. Great. So now that's the part I was missing. And now what I can do is I can actually select, if I right click and drag, I can select these multiple points. So I'm going to select where I am too loud and drag. Oops. I'm going to select where I'm too loud. Grab a point in there and pull that down. So now it won't clip. Great. And for our door slamming, because it's contributing to some distortion and clipping anyway, I'm actually going to go back into trim mode, and I'm going to pull my door down -3 dB or so. I'm going to do the same thing with my squeak. So notice we're not seeing these faders follow because we're in trim mode right now. If I go back to touch mode, the faders will follow. And this is a process you're going to have to go over many times, essentially where you start mixing something and you clip. You either clip an individual track, you clip a group of tracks, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks, or you clip the master fader output. And then you're going to have to say, well, I can't clip because Dr. Music's going to dock me on points if he analyzes my track and sees that I go over, which I'm going to. So then you're going to have to figure out how do you deal with it so that you don't clip. And unfortunately, you're going to have to bring everything down. So this gets into the idea of gain staging, which we haven't introduced properly yet, but you want to set up your mix so that you have headroom to mix into. You, of course, also want to set up your mix so that you're not wasting a whole bunch of room at the top and not taking full advantage of the maximum dynamic range. When you're mixing, I would say shooting for a max peak amplitude of -3 dB is probably good, roughly. And honestly, if you were anywhere in a range from -1, -1.5 at a max peak, down to -6, -7, give yourself that headroom, because we can always load in a track afterwards and normalize it, which I showed you how to do a couple weeks ago. But if we clip, we can't do anything to fix that distortion. So it's got to stay below it. So be conservative with the way that you set your levels. If you normalize every track, like I've shown you, go into the individual track trims, again, kind of here, where we can grab a track and grab the section trim down, maybe pull those down. Remember that in your trim for each track, you can pull the individual tracks down and then go back to working with automation. It's a balancing act. You're going to get better at it as you go. But here's the secret that everyone is told and everyone repeats, but is hard to remember. Mixing is really about subtraction, not addition. Be conservative in the levels you set. And when something needs to be louder, rather than making that source louder, consider if the other sources around it should instead be brought down. So let's say I want to add these voices here. I'm just going to add, we'll duplicate this track and put it on top. And then I'm going to move it over here. We'll delete this audio. And then we're going to move our quick speaking thing up here. It doesn't matter where we come in. I'll put a fade on it. Kind of a long fade. We'll bring it in over here. And of course, I'm also going to turn my volume on for it. And let's listen to what we have going on here. Notice our levels. I want to hear more of that voice. I want to hear more of that voice. So I'm going to check my trim levels and see where am I at. Okay, so we see that the voice is currently set to 0 dB on trim. I don't want to turn that up anymore. That's going to cause clipping on that track if I turn it up. So I'm actually going to turn it down on my trim to negative 1.46. And then I'm going to grab my geese and I'm going to bring them down to negative 6. I'm going to grab my train and bring it down to negative 6. And my squeak is at negative 2.94, so I'm going to bring it down to around negative 9, which is essentially 3 plus 6. Likewise, I'm at 368 on my door slam, so I'm going to bring that down to negative 10 or so. And now let's listen. I'm going to click over here to reset my peaks. I have room. I can always turn the output of my speakers up if it's not loud enough for me. But if I clip in the digital domain, I can't do anything. That distortion is there. So now I can come over here and I can start to write my automation. Oops, as on trim, so I'm going to go back to touch so that I see it. And I'm going to pull it down. It's going to fade in. Wait. I'm going to check my trim levels to make sure I didn't go too far. Oh, look, somehow I accidentally zeroed it out because I hit 0 on it when I was still in trim mode. So I'm going to go to negative 6 dB. Now I'm going to go back to touch mode. I told you, you're going to get in trouble. I get in trouble with this difference between trim mode and automation mode. Be careful about it. The other thing that you're going to check is you're going to try to write an automation, but you're not going to be armed, and you're going to have a hard time figuring out why. Remember to check the arming for recording. So now we're going to do this. I'm going to pull down. I'm going to pull up a little bit. And then I can mix it back down as the doors things start to come back in again. So I'm able to write in this volume automation in response to what I'm hearing. And then I can go back and clean it up later, which is really powerful. And again, I'm not clipping. I get negative 0.7. That's a little bit hotter than I want, so I might need to go back in to my main trims and pull them all down a little bit more. But I didn't clip at least. Great. The other thing that we can automate actually is our panning position. So there's going to be some sources that you're going to set, and they're going to live in that spot for the rest of the piece, right? They're not going to move. You want your train on this side. You want your kids bouncing on this other side over here. You want your geese somewhere in the back thrown away so we don't have to hear them. But there might be sources that you actually want to move in the stereo field. So if I click on this link again for envelope, I'm going to click pan. And now notice I have a second automation lane that's come up underneath my volume automation lane for this fast speech. And we're still in touch mode, so all of the same principles apply. I'm going to play here. And here is my pan knob in my meter. So we start here, and I'm going to move it over. And move it right. I'm going to slowly bring it across our stereo field. Great, and because I was in touch mode, it bounced back to the center when I stopped touching it. Notice I also had some problems with a little bit of clipping, so I'm going to grab in here with my pencil and just bring this down a little bit right there. And now if we listen to it, Then right in the center. Great. So it follows the automation. I'm able to compose this piece spatially, amplitude-wise, loudness-wise, over time. So I'm I'm using editing and sound mixing techniques for creative purposes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm done with my mix creatively. And I'm going to go in there, I'm going to clean up. I'm going to say, oh, look, I peaked. And let me fix, where did that peak happen? Oh, does everything sound the way I want it to? I'm going to take off my composition creative hat. I'm going to put on my technical hat. I'm going to work on those things then. I hope this helps, though, at least with the techniques of automation.